Okay, so in a recent video, I mentioned how there were 5 popular gym exercises that I'd no longer perform. And in this video, I'll mention 3 not at all common exercises that I do perform. We'll talk about their benefits from an injury prevention perspective and muscle building perspective and anatomical perspective, all good stuff. I rarely see these performed in my gym or even recommended on YouTube. And one of them I do see from some fitness influencers, but it's still a pretty uncommon one in the grand scheme of things. Now, this pretty uncommon exercise is number 1, the hanging leg raise. I have seen this on fitness YouTube before, but I never see it at my gym, and even at other gyms, I rarely see this. Chances are it's not done since most people can't actually perform this. It is hard, but even the function itself of curling your pelvis to your rib cage, I don't see much of. This is an anatomical perspective I'll mention shortly. So this is good because it builds up your rectus abdominis, which is your abs. It's what most people think of when they hear abs. Your abs have many intended functions. The main one I heard a lot back in the day was to resist movement, which is why planks are generally considered a good core exercise, but a plank is an isometric movement, and people never usually said abs, they said core. There's a difference here. An isometric movement is generally not the best way to build muscle. Isometric is when the muscle doesn't contract or extend. There's no concentric or eccentric movement involved. It's why you don't just pause an exercise at the top or bottom of the movement. It'd be like if you performed a bench press and you let the bar down to your chest, but instead of pressing it back up, you just held it there. So that's why I don't do planks anymore. Should have been a bonus exercise that I don't do in my last video. It's good for building your overall core strength, but in terms of creating a nice looking set of abs, this is probably something you want to ditch for another movement. So back to my point, there are multiple functions for your rectus abdominis, one of which is to move the body between the rib cage and the pelvis. So this is why many people do crunches or sit-ups or cable crunches or whatever. This movement involves bringing the rib cage towards the pelvis. But there's a reason you want to do hanging leg raises over these crunches. 1. The hanging leg raise provides more resistance. Despite doing this movement 2 out of 4 of my gym sessions per week, if I even take 1 week off gym, after coming back and doing leg raises, I can feel DOMS in my abs. Delayed onset muscle soreness. It's where you're sore the next day. Usually you don't get this after you've been training for a while. I don't feel DOMS anywhere else in my body besides legs after taking a week off. Very effective exercise. Yeah, I know DOMS isn't exactly what you're supposed to be chasing to grow your muscle, but clearly if you get DOMS, you know you've actually worked the said muscle. And 2, spine health. Dr. Stu McGill has done a lot of research into this topic, and the TLDR is, doing crunches causes some wear and tear on your spine. Now, if you do 10 crunches in your next gym session, you're not going to have permanent spinal issues by next week, but over time, the wear and tear will take effect. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to train until I'm 30, then be too banged up to train. Not to mention the daily pain you'd endure with a permanently damaged spine. Ouch. But if I can't do crunches, how can I train my abs? With leg raise movements. Problem solved. Training your rectus abdominis in one of its intended movement patterns involves moving the body between the rib cage and the pelvis. But if you can't bring the rib cage to the pelvis due to the wear and tear on your spine, then what's left? Well, bringing your pelvis towards your rib cage. This is basically any leg raise movement. Moving your pelvis towards your rib cage doesn't cause the same pressure on your vertebrae as vice versa. In terms of hanging leg raises, don't just bring your legs to your stomach either. Doing this mostly just works your adductors from what I've seen, not your abs, since you're not performing the function of your rectus abdominis properly. Your pelvis is barely moving if you just raise your legs to your stomach. It has to be all the way to your rib cage. One function of the rectus abdominis is to bring your rib cage and the pelvis together, not bring the pelvis towards your stomach. If you can't do leg raises, try hanging knee raises. If you can't do that, don't do the leg raise to stomach variation. Do them on the floor first, then build up to using cables as resistance. Get those Velcro strap things, tie it around your ankles and curl your pelvis towards your rib cage that way. I believe the exercise is called a reverse cable crunch if you want to know how to do that properly. Then move to hanging leg raises or hanging knee raises. I found in my experience that using your body weight as resistance when curling your pelvis towards your rib cage was more effective than using cables as resistance, but Try them both out and see how you go. Also, don't do planks for abs either. Should have mentioned that as a common gym exercise I don't do in the last video. Chances are I'll do another video on common gym exercises I don't do, but planks involve mostly/wholly an isometric contraction. Your rectus abdominis isn't being worked for aesthetic purposes doing this. It's a great exercise for overall core strength, but not for building abs. You'd have some people on YouTube talk about how they build their abs via planks, but like I said in my other video with deadlifts and the back, they're hardcore gym rats. Everything they have is well developed. Chances are they're getting something wrong. I mean, I barely ever did planks in my routine. Look at the abs I had once upon a time. I'm in the middle of a bulk, so hence why I haven't used recent pics, but I never really did planks. And look at what I was able to achieve with my abs. So to wrap up this section, want to build abs? Do pelvis to rib cage movements, not vice versa. Don't be doing planks for your abs. It's an isometric movement. Don't be doing crunches for abs. That'll cause wear and tear on your spine. Do movements that involve bringing your pelvis towards your rib cage, aka curling your legs up. So the lesser known, more secret exercise that I rarely see people do is the hanging leg raise. Fantastic ab builder. It's helped me see my abs even at peak bulk around 20% body fat. Okay, so in doing some extra research for this video, I came across some comments from some people saying that this exercise caused them spinal issues. But according to further digging, it seems that this only causes problems if you have some existing problems. It doesn't seem that hanging leg raises are the sole cause of the problem itself. It'd be like saying, oh, my wrists hurt when I do shoulder press, but you got those sore wrists from work. Maybe the exercise doesn't help, but it wasn't the sole cause, if that makes sense.
So the flexion and extension aspect to it, when you are hanging from the bar and you're bringing the legs up, the higher you go, the more of a crunch you're gonna get and the more activation in the core you're gonna have. So we're encouraged to really kind of emphasize that knee to chest or that toes to bar, whatever that might be. What's happening in your lower back is you're going into that forced flexion. Flexion is not dangerous. Flexion is nothing wrong with flexion. Our body is designed to flex the spine. But what happens is when you are a highly sensitive and you're irritated and more flexion is making it worse, this type of exercise is, yes, it may make your core stronger. The same thing goes with the extension aspect. As you come down, typically, sometimes people will let their legs swings back to gain some momentum. If you're looking at it from a flexion and extension tolerance perspective, this is why I'm not a fan of the leg raise. If you are flexion or extension intolerant, or both, or one or the other, this exercise is going to emphasize that. Regardless of how you do it, it's going to emphasize those intolerances. So if you're not careful, this can be a trigger for you, and you'll have a low undergrade pain level that you'll never be able to shake, you'll never be able to figure out, because you continue to do things like the hanging leg raise. Next.
So like this dude says, your body is designed to do this, but essentially his argument is don't do this if it causes your existing problems to flare up. Fair enough. Same goes for any exercise really. This was also the only video I found that went over why the hanging leg raise can cause issues. Every other source was just like, oh, it hurts my back. Okay, well, I can't dissect this from an anatomical point of view if I don't know exactly why it's causing you problems. I mean, it's common sense though. If any exercise that I recommend causes you pain, then don't do it. The thing with gym exercises and the internet is everyone can say whatever the hell they want, and you can just say everyone else's opinion is rubbish. Here's a Reddit post of someone saying leg raises don't work your abs. Well, they work them secondarily. But the comment response is basically saying, the info you're getting is somewhat biased, and it turns out if you bring your legs further up, then it works your abs more, which is exactly what I said earlier. Don't bring your legs up to your stomach, bring them higher. Bring the pelvis towards the rib cage like it was designed to do. I bring this up to show you that you can always hear someone's opinion on the internet that goes against what someone else said. Example, I say hanging leg raises is good, others say it hurts their spine. So I showed you people saying that hanging leg raises hurt their spine. Well, here's a blog saying that their spine health got better after doing hanging leg raises. Again, there's always an opposite opinion on the internet. Here's an article saying the leg raise is not an ab movement. What? How is this not an ab movement? The movement pattern is literally doing what the abs were designed to do. Here is that same article giving some exercise science nerd reasonings as to why you feel it in your abs, but it also says everything here happens at a 90-degree angle. What is a 90-degree angle? Well, it's this. We all learned this in school. And what angle is this at a hanging leg raise? Yep, having your legs at your stomach, not right up, as I stated earlier. And as you scroll through the article, would you look at that? They themselves recommend what I recommend. Legs right up, pelvis towards ribcage. Clickbait ass title. Although in their defense, they were arguing against the legs to stomach thing. So here is a comment that basically defends my stance on hanging leg raises. And he's also got a lot of likes on this comment. So, he's not the only one. The video was basically saying something against legs to bar, aka pelvis towards ribcage. This comment supports my idea. But yet, there were comments I showed beforehand saying how this movement hurts their back. The internet, where there's always an opposite stance. And lastly, another comment saying hanging leg raises hurt their spine, but as you can see, he had sciatica, an existing spine issue. So as I said earlier, common sense, if you get hurt doing this movement, then stop doing it. If this movement causes your pain to flare up, then stop doing it. So I'd find more information on this, but then the video would be even longer, and people can't handle long videos since TikTok has fried y'all's attention spans. But the summary of this section is, the hanging leg raise, pelvis towards ribcage, is a great ab builder. But if you have existing spine issues, this can cause that problem to flare up. Like with anything on the internet, you'll have people who disagree or have a problem with something. I haven't seen anything anatomically that shows that hanging leg raises directly causes spinal problems themselves, which is what I did see with crunches as per Stu McGill's research. And I've done hanging leg raises constantly for ages, and my spine is fine. Stu McGill suggests he's big three as opposed to crunches. However, that's for spine health, not ab building. The big three that he recommends are either isometric muscular contractions, or there is no real way to add resistance, like bird dogs. How do you add resistance to that? So to finish this section, the hanging leg raise is the best ab builder in my opinion. Some disagree, but there's more evidence to support the hanging leg raise as opposed to supporting crunches or planks or any other ab movement really. I would talk about the ab wheel another time, but that still doesn't target your abs as much as the hanging leg raise. 2. Unilateral cable flies. So in terms of cable flies, most people just do them using both cables, but I've been doing them with one at a time lately. And I bring the cable right across my body, basically across to my opposite shoulder. Whereas when you do those cable flies for each side at the same time, the range of motion usually stops at the sternum or the middle of your body. I've seen some people cross the cables over when they do this, but I don't see them doing one at a time. So, why is this good, and how has it improved my physique? If you've seen my prior video on this topic, you'd sort of already know, but basically, doing this unilateral fly trains my pec in its intended function, since the function of your pec is to move your elbow across your body. Yes, bench press or any horizontal/incline/decline press does this, any fly does this, so what's so special about this unilateral fly? It's the added range of motion. I talked in the prior video about how a bench press doesn't train your pec in a full range of motion, despite it being the one movement you can load the heaviest on. Best bet is to do both a pressing and fly movement for your pecs, which is what I do. I do flat dumbbell press as well, but dragging the cable right across your body to your other shoulder takes the range of motion to another level. Try it for yourself and feel the difference as opposed to a regular cable fly. I've already noticed a change in my pecs despite only adding this in over the past several months. Yeah, obviously this wasn't the only exercise I did for my pecs, but I can really feel the muscle working with this movement. And the pumps are insane. Yes, just because you have a pump doesn't indicate muscle growth, but it at least shows you've worked the muscle well. 3. Rope upright rows. Now I've already made a video on this exercise, but I've had a lot of new subscribers since then, and I don't expect them to all backdate and watch all my prior videos, but I'll go over the reasons why this is a great hidden gem of an exercise. I rarely see anyone do it, and this will really transform your medial delts, which is by far the most important deltoid to grow in terms of improving your aesthetic appearance. I'll talk about why the upright row is by far the best exercise for your medial delts. So you have your anterior, medial, and rear delt, right? The three heads of the shoulder. The anterior's function is to raise your arm in front of you or to help press weight up. The medial delt's function is to abduct your arm, aka bring it away from your body. The rear delt's function is to retract your scapula, aka pull your shoulders back, which is why it's worked in basically every row/back movement you do. For some reason, people think your standard shoulder press works your medial delts. Well, you're not really moving your arm out to the side when you're doing shoulder press. I suppose it can kinda do that, but you're way better off just doing another set of lateral raises if that was your goal. I've seen some EMG, electromagnetic research, showing that medial delts get somewhat worked during a shoulder press. Look, fine, whatever. EMG research has its limitations. For those who don't know, it's the exercise science person way of seeing how muscles are worked during certain movements, so you know what to do. But I'll save you thousands of dollars in research. Go onto a search engine/AI assistant website or whatever, ask it what the function of insert muscle here is, and then train that movement pattern in the gym with resistance/volume. No need for all that fancy EMG equipment. You're welcome. But anyway, to grow big medial delts, spamming shoulder presses doesn't make sense from an anatomical perspective. I know I've seen some mass monsters on YouTube say heavy shoulder presses is how they build their medial delts, but every muscle they have is big. It's easy for them to get confused on how they grew their muscles. If you want a case study, look at me. Yeah, I'm not huge since, I have a life outside a gym, but clearly my medial delts aren't lacking. Look at them compared to my biceps, for example. I don't know if I'm the only one who sees this, but in most cases you'd have the opposite. Smaller medial delts but larger biceps. So clearly I'm doing something right with my medial delt training. Regardless of if you want to take my case study and believe it, going into the anatomical side of things helps dissect why rope upright rows are the best medial delt exercise. Exercise 3, your girl. Ha! Gotcha! This is a fake timestamp. You thought you could do a sneaky and skip a few sections, Watch the video. So you could just do more lateral raises, right? That's the most common medial delt exercise. Well, this has its limitations, namely resistance. You can't just jump up from doing 17.5 kilo lateral raises in one session to 20 kilos to 22.5 kilos to 25 kilos in rapid succession. Chances are you'll be stuck on the lower weights for a while, since, it's an isolation exercise. So, if the most commonly known medial delt exercise is an isolation exercise, are we cooked in terms of finding ways to increase resistance for the medial delts? Are we doomed to stick to isolations? Well, no. Upright rows have entered the chat. Now, the upright row does work your medial delt as you're abducting your arm to the side, but it can lead to shoulder impingements due to the internal rotation of the shoulder, since you're causing issues relating to the subacromial space, acromion, bursa, and rotator cuff, as mentioned in my prior video. Basically, the way your body is designed means doing this upright row movement can lead to shoulder impingement. When your elbows get raised up and out to the side, with your thumb pointing towards the ground, with your elbow also being above your shoulder height, as is what happens with an upright row, you basically have a recipe for issues relating to shoulder impingement. It's mostly due to a combination of these three factors. Example, you don't cause internal rotation if you lift your arm straight up in front of you. When you do this, your elbow is above your shoulder, which was one of the ingredients for the prior recipe for disaster, but since your arm is straight out and not to your side, and your thumb is facing the ceiling, not the floor, you don't have any internal rotation of the shoulder. But raising your arm in front of you is a movement for your anterior deltoid, not your medial deltoid. In some cases at work, you'll have to awkwardly lift objects in a way that will mean you're doing all three. Your elbows are out to the side, they're above your shoulder, and your thumbs are pointed down. Sometimes at work, those are movements you just have to perform, but as long as they're not prolonged, as they would be in a consistent gym routine, you should be fine. But definitely don't be making this a regular occurrence in your gym routine. Okay, so upright rows are out then, since we want to have longevity and joint safety. Well, everything I said applies to an upright row involving a barbell or an easy curl bar. We can use dumbbells, that way our wrists aren't fixed to a bar, but although you have a little more freedom of movement in your wrists, you are still performing internal rotation of the shoulder since your thumbs are pointed down, as that's how you hold the dumbbells for this exercise. And you need to raise your elbow above your shoulder to the side to get the full contraction in your medial delts. The reason why dumbbell upright rows work better than a barbell upright row from an anatomical point of view is because your arms/wrists aren't fixed to a bar, they have more freedom to move. This extra freedom means you can pull the dumbbells further out, away from your body, shoulder abduction, which is what the medial delts were intended to do. But in this case, you'd just be performing some odd variation of a lateral raise then. And it also doesn't address the issue of resistance. You'd still have the problem of jumping up in the dumbbell rack. Good luck going from 30 kilos to 32.5 to 35 kilos in a short time span. Okay, so no barbells or dumbbells for upright rows. What can we do? Well, rope ones, as I'm about to go into. We needed to mention the others first, since no doubt someone would be asking about them, although I should have just not mentioned it, since that means someone would have asked in the comments, and comments are good for the algorithm. So the benefit of using a rope as opposed to a bar or dumbbells are, with a rope, your wrists aren't fixed to a bar, unlike a barbell upright row, and your thumbs aren't pointed towards the floor, like they are with a dumbbell upright row, since you can hold the rope with a neutral grip. One counter-argument is, well, just hold the dumbbells with a neutral grip. However, this just turns it into a hybrid sort of lateral raise, and even then, still, you'd be unable to progressively overload easily with dumbbells, since you're using dumbbells and not machines. As well as the fact that since you're fighting against gravity as opposed to a cable, the strength/resistance curve isn't as optimal for your medial delts. So using a rope upright row, you get a compound movement that targets your medial delts. You won't get shoulder impingements as the resistance is out in front of you, cables and the resistance from the cable stack, as opposed to above you, free weights and gravity. It's easier to progressively overload as adding a couple of kilos on the cable machine is easier than jumping 2.5 kilos on each side for an isolation movement. And lastly, since your wrists aren't fixated to anything, your medial delts can move properly outwards as they were designed to do, in a way that mimics the movement pattern of a lateral raise, but with the ability to lift more. So that's why rope upright rows are the best exercise for your medial delts. You have the ability to add more resistance/weight to the movement, since it's a compound movement. Unlike the common lateral raise, and unlike the compound barbell upright row movement, this doesn't place your shoulders in a compromised position. I've said a lot on this, but if you want to know more, I did mention more in the video I made almost 3 years ago now on this topic. Wow, 3 years ago. Damn, time flies. So these are 3 exercises that are rarely performed in the gym, at least from what I've seen. If you've seen these movements performed in your gym commonly, then I'm sorry I didn't ask for your insight before making this video, but I haven't seen these performed at my gym. The closest is a unilateral cable fly, and even then they don't use the extra range of motion, and they usually just go for the 2 cables at the same time anyway. And the reason these will transform your physique, as the title suggests, is because these are 3 fantastic ways to train your abs, pecs, and medial delts in their intended function, which is how you get a muscle to grow. Look at your current physique. Now add a bit more size to the pecs and shoulders, then add some density to your abs. Just imagine how much better you'd look with all of these improvements. So, any thoughts? Any exercises that you do that others don't? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. That is all.